All right, let's continue on. Let's talk about some more elements of mediation. First, let's talk about the fact that power lies in mediation lies in neutrality. The reason why mediation works and the reason why we are able to help people come to an agreement as mediators is that they believe, both parties believe, that I don't have a vested interest. I'm neutral and I don't care. I'm just there to help you all come to a resolution that works for you all. So, first off, you cannot side with other parties. They will try to drag you in. They will try to get you to be your friend and you agree with me. Do not side. You have to stay neutral. I don't care what's going on in your head. You have to stay neutral. Beware of your biases. If that's obviously something you can't deal with as a mediator, don't. Step aside and let somebody else be the mediator. This is not something that everybody has to do. If you are not comfortable with a domestic violence situation, don't. If you're not comfortable talking about someone's drug use, don't. These are things you have to be aware of. So step aside if you are not the mediator they need. One of the things, like we talked about in nonverbals, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it or don't say it. So when somebody's talking to you and they're listening and you're listening, you can't do like shocked facial expressions and, oh my Lord, that's it. And you'd be like, oh no, I'm fine. It's not a big deal. You have to keep your body language in check along with your verbal language. So you have to make sure you're just got like this perfect poker face and you're neutral. Now here's the deal. Ain't nobody neutral. As soon as the first person starts talking, you start making evaluations, you start making decisions. It's not means that you're going to decide with that person versus the other person. These are things that are going on in your head. You have to keep it neutral. You have to keep it straight. I know it's there, but you just got to recognize that it exists, and then you've got to move on and make sure that you're balancing everything equally. You have to be conscious of this. Now, one of the things that we run into in mediation is that we have to balance power. That's never equal. No two sides are ever equal. There's always something that has age, race, gender, income, socioeconomic status, education, rank, position, etc. All of those things affect the balance of power. A principal and a student is a significant power balance. Parent and teacher, power balance. Rich and poor has a power balance. Imbalance. Sorry, not balance, imbalance. As the mediator, it is not your job to achieve a perfect balance. You can't do it. It's never going to be there. Your job is to establish self-determination. If both parties are able to self-determine and they can argue in the mediation room and they can negotiate equally in the mediation room, even with the power imbalance, then you can mediate. If you cannot get them to that self-determination, if you cannot get them to the point that they can do what they need to do without fear of reprisal or anything else, then you don't mediate. Your job is not to make it level. Your job is to make it equitable to where they can actually mediate. So, always going to be in balance. Sometimes you can balance it out a little bit. Sometimes you just can't get them there and you can't mediate. So let's look at some of the mediation toolboxes. These are things that we've gone over in the past, you're familiar with or should be familiar with. And these are some tools, restating. We talked about that. Restating what they said, telling them back to them, kind of parroting back to make sure they understand it. Reframing, not just what you say, but what they say. If they say something very derogatory in a bad way, you can restate it back to them in a reframed format to let them hear it sound better. Sometimes you need to tell it back to them in the same way so they can hear it and say, oh my God, I didn't mean it that way. Or you can reframe it so that they understand that. And they can get the same thing across without being so inflammatory. Clarifying, making sure what they're saying and what they know is what you want. Mirroring is that same thing as that leaning forward as they lean forward, leaning back. When they jump up and test, don't do that. Don't do aggressiveness. Always ask open-ended questions. There are times when you need close-ended. If someone's been talking for 20 minutes, you can start asking some close-ended questions and cause them to shut up. But ask those questions, let them open up. Be aware of your body language as well as theirs. You're watching theirs for that, but make sure that you're open and you're giving and you're leaning forward and interested in those kind of things. Eye contact is another thing. We talked about that in the nonverbals. Make sure that you are making eye contact if you feel like it's appropriate. If it's a situation where it's not appropriate, don't. But those are the things you need to do. We've talked about shutting up. Shutting up is good. Ask a question and then shut up. Let the client sit in silence for a while and let them figure out. Sometimes you need to take a break and just everybody step away and let the tension die down a little bit. Everybody go out and have a smoke break, or everybody go out and get your Coke, whatever. Let's take a second, get on the phone, play a game, do something to stress out. Humor is a good thing to be able to utilize. The downfall to humor is that it's not always acceptable. As you guys know me, I am one that likes to cut up jokes, and I use inappropriate jokes a lot of times, or what some people might consider inappropriate material at the time. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. You have to read the room. You can't cut jokes that everybody over here on the side, you got the one party over here that's like, that's not funny. You got to balance it. You got to make sure everybody's on the same page, but you can use a little humor. Dealing with the interest versus positions, getting people to talk about their whys over their whats is always useful. Recognizing feelings is another thing. You cannot ignore it. I don't care how transactional the situation is. Everybody has to deal with their emotions before you can move forward. Try to drag them on what's future. Yes, we need to hear from the past. We need to hear back of what they've said in the background, but at the same token, we need to be able to move forward, because from the mediation standpoint, once we've vented, once we've dealt with the past, now let's look forward. What can we do moving forward? Keep them focused that way. Sometimes visual aids help. If you're doing a co-parenting plan, having a picture of the child out in front of the room helps. Setting a chair in the middle between the parties and saying this represents that party, the child, helps them recognize that they're talking about the kid, not themselves. I'm going to put the next two together because they're very useful together. Sometimes you can deal with bits, and you can say, let's solve this little bit first before we move on to this little bit. Sometimes you can do option tracks, which is the idea of, well, if we go this way, we can come up with these, and let's add that third one here while we're at it. But if you do these ones, you can go this way. Sometimes you can group things together. It's kind of that negotiation tactics. So it's the idea of, okay, so let's negotiate with this group. Let's negotiate with that group. One of the ideas of negotiation is the idea of keeping at least two items going at the same time, because it allows you to go back and forth and allows you to do some of that grouping or option tracks or what ideas. So the notion is that I'm going to work with this and this, so when we get stalled on this, we can shift to this really quick, and vice versa, and we can move around. I do it a lot in family plans when we're day-to-day has really struggled. So let's go talk about Christmas. Let's talk about Thanksgiving. Let's talk about Easter. Let's talk about these other holidays. Okay, so we're stuck on those. Let's come back to this for a minute. Oh, it's still stuck here. Let's go talk about transportation, and we bounce around. And what happens is it keeps them moving, and it keeps them going in a direction instead of becoming stalemated. Sometimes it's like, okay, so if this, and this happens, and you could agree to this. So we're going to group that group together, and that's a track we can go. But what if this, and this happens? How do we go this way? So these are the ideas. As the mediator, you are helping them negotiate their plan. We already talked about brainstorming. Help them come up with ideas. Separate sessions. I kind of hinted on that. Sometimes you need to separate the parties and talk to this one versus talk to that one. It gives them a chance to vent, tell you something they wouldn't tell somebody else. Maybe you can see something that you need to help them reframe, get some ideas of their what behind their why, or their why behind their what. Reality testing, it's called BATNA or WATNA, best alternative to negotiated agreement, or worst alternative to negotiated agreement. Sometimes you got to talk to them and says, look, if we don't come up with a solution, what's going to happen? You're going to go talk to the judge. That's going to be the situation. What's going to work? Back when you're in that separate session, sometimes you got to do a little coaching and educating. Sometimes I got to tell people, hey, you need to think about how you can present this to parties. How is it going to work for you? Let's look at this. I'm not telling them what to say, but I'm telling them how to say it necessarily. Or I'm giving some coaching advice or teaching them some situations that would help them better deal with this. Sometimes working over food is a good idea. And we already talked about the co-mediator. I think a co-mediator is an awesome situation because it gives you a second party to help you work things out. And the last but not least is room layout. Remember in nonverbals, we talked about territory and we talked about your spacing and all those things. So when we look at this chart and we're looking at these and we're seeing the ideas, and the reason why I want to bring this up is that if you look and you see you've got the participants, the mediator, the actual, well, just the table thing, and then a chart. So like this is your whiteboard. So when you look at these, a lot of people look and say, well, that's a good one, and this is a good one. Here's a great one. Okay, so let me bring out, B is actually the best option because it puts these two parties against or working together through the mediator to get the solution, in opposed to this one, puts the parties closer together and therefore may be viewed as being sided. Same here. This one is fine, except what happens is it's this versus that. This is the most adversarial position there is. And again, you got the mediator siding to the one person. So you have to be careful how you do things, because you don't want, even physical space, putting me closer to a party can lead the idea of that I am more leaning towards that person physically. So therefore, during the mediation, so putting people up juxtaposed against each other gives the idea of it's me versus you instead of us working together to come to a common solution.